everybody. Today we're going to be talking to Paul about his ideas to fix the economy, to create millions of jobs, and to reduce our federal deficit. So Paul, give us a basic view of what you're talking about.
Well, I started on this. It was easy to predict the housing collapse. And I just said there has to be a way to keep housing strong to ensure that young families, single people, minority families would get their shot at the American dream through homeownership, but it had to be done in a fiscally sound manner. And it just turned out to be very, 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 very simple. In essence, the only way to get into a home you can afford is with a decent down payment. Without that, you get stuck with a higher interest rate and additional private mortgage insurance, jacking up the monthly mortgage costs, almost ensuring a foreclosure down the road. So, in order to get a down payment, 401k holders can borrow from their 401k for a down payment. As long as they make payments back to their 401k, there is no early withdrawal ding. My premise was, is it possible to allow people to borrow from their Social Security for a secured down payment for first-time homeownership? Well, there were two things to stop it. One, there is no money in Social Security. There's nothing but IOUs there. And two, what would happen if you did allow someone to borrow against their Social Security and then they did blow the home? They'd also be losing future Social Security benefits. The cure for that was very, very simple. You don't take any money from Social Security because there is none, and you cover any and all defaults. I did talk with the Treasury Secretary's assistants. I talked with Social Security. I talked with just about every business group in the country. There are some parallels, though nothing has quite been done this way. A person or a couple, if they prove they can make the payments, they're not overstepping their bounds and trying to buy a McMansion for their first home, would voluntarily tell the Secretary of the Treasury, which is Social Security, to stop putting 2.7% interest on $30,000 or $45,000 of what's already in their account that they want to borrow against. The rest continues to draw interest, which of course builds our ever-burgeoning federal debt. You do 500,000 of these loans every year for the first 10 years, you would in essence wipe out 35 to 42 billion in Social Security trust fund debt without spending a single solitary taxpayer penny. Those people are giving it up. You use that money, 10-year savings, just like it was cash now. You buy 10-year Fed bonds, you do a lot of secured, exempt from equity borrowing down payment for first-time homeownership. At the end of the year, when the family now itemizes solely from the piece of return generated because of writing off the property tax and the interest, the majority of that is automatically going to be deducted from their federal return and repaid back to Social Security for them. The pool of borrowers covers any and all costs. There's additional funding in there to help teach people how to clean up their credit and possibly qualify a little further down the road. There's money in there to ensure that any and all defaults possible are fully covered. So even if someone does mess up, they don't lose that $30,000 or $45,000 from future Social Security benefits, which unfortunately for younger people is beginning to look ever weaker and weaker and weaker as to them ever having any Social Security in the first place. The National Association of Home Builders said it's for 1.25 million jobs, 1.248 thousand, 1.25 million construction jobs. HUD, using pretty much my exact figures, came up with a figure of 4.1 million jobs, which I have a reprint of the AP press conference in the proposal with all the documents. I have all the figures for state and federal revenues on 1.25 million jobs all the way up to 4.1 million if we do get there. I believe it's only 2.96 to 3.1 million. If it goes to 4.1, I'll be a pretty happy camper. It ensures people get into a home that they can afford. It ensures American jobs. And because the jobs created are centered around construction, and you have the system development fees or building impact fees for each unit built, whether it's a single family home or a condo, and those vary all over the country, and the increased property tax base, when I did a head-to-head comparison on a federal infrastructure job, which the federal infrastructure jobs are pretty high paying, they generate a certain amount of revenues. Once that money is spent, those guys are all out of work. Those are not sustainable permanent jobs. Granted, we get good long-term benefits in fixed roads and bridges, But those poor guys are back out of work again as soon as that money is spent, and unfortunately, we probably borrowed the money and we're paying interest on it too. My jobs pay for themselves. They actually give a small debt reduction in the first 10 years. It's only $40 billion, which I guess is spit in Washington, D.C. Most of us here at home would like to find that check in our couch cushions, though. But the jobs are permanent, they're self-sustaining, there's no cost to taxpayers whatsoever. It helps shore back up the floor of housing. Housing prices will go back up. People will be happy to carry these loans because they're fiscally sound. There are good parameters around them. You're not being allowed to borrow what you can't afford. We do get a debt reduction. People do become homeowners, build wealth towards retirement. It's the #1 way of addressing a low level of savings for working class families, increasing minority homeownership in the country without bankrupting the country.
Well, let me ask you this, Paul. How do you know that your proposal could actually be accomplished?
Well, I've talked with the home builders, the manufacturers, National Federation of Independent Business, another organization that gave me a letter. I've talked with the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard's Joint Task Force on Housing. Anybody and everybody has anything to do with construction, manufacturing the bits and pieces that go into a home. I've gotten facts and figures from them. I've also gotten facts and figures from the federal government and the state governments. So if my figures are wrong, every figure that's ever used in projections on a state or federal level are hokum. And the facts are there, the jobs are absolute, they can't be denied, the numbers have been crunched.
Now, if this goes into effect, your proposal, how many people will this actually affect in their lives?
In essence, it will affect every single person in the United States of America. Not only do you help a family become a homeowner, watch your granddaughter and son or her husband get a home, we get the jobs, we get the increased revenues on both the state and federal level, and all the facts are in the proposal on the figures. Because of the massive amount of money on the state and local level created strictly because of these jobs, there are hundreds of billions of dollars in the first 10 years that get divvied up between the states, sorely needed for schools, police, and fire, public services, without going after existing homeowners and pinching them some more for another teeny little tax increase again. So this will relieve the burden for increased taxes on folks that already are part of the middle class or do have a home, while helping ensure other people get into that, get into middle class, build some wealth towards retirement, and we have the jobs. And it is cyclical. If the jobs are out there and the economy is booming, the housing is going to boom. You know, it feeds upon itself.
So far, you have shared with us many numbers and number crunches. You mentioned a few agencies that have verified them. Could you again reassure us that your numbers are correct?
Again, unless the federal government lies on their projections, unless the state government lies, unless economists lie, unless the home builders, the mortgage brokers, the realtors, the land title association people, etc., 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 the National Federation of Independent Business, unless they're all wrong or they're all blowing things out of proportion, these numbers are spot on. As a matter of fact, I've had people review that and say that it appears that you overestimated the cost and you fully covered those, and your revenue projections look conservative. And yes, they are. When it goes for hearings, I believe it's impossible to poke any holes in it.
I have here a letter sent to you by the University of Oregon Charles H. Lindquist College of Business, signed by Philip J. Romero, who was the dean at the time. And it says, in his words, that your proposal would help repair the intergenerational compact that has been sundered by the current Social Security system.
I believe that's a very, very nice statement. Honestly, of course, I believe it's true. I actually believe Social Security can be totally fixed. This is just a little baby step towards doing that. It will ensure jobs, ensure people get home ownership and middle class inclusion through that. Further questions about Social Security, we'll address down the pike.
So a lot of the young people that are worried about Social Security, this professor seems to say, this dean, excuse me, seems to say that your proposal would really help them.
Well, one thing it absolutely does, for those that are younger who may never see a penny of it, even though they're paying into it, this ensures that they get something out of it now that they've already paid for, and they may never see anything out of. And there's absolutely no risk. They are not taking money out of Social Security. We are not threatening any of the baby boomers that are collecting checks now. In essence, we are making it stronger. It's a small aid. It's only $40 billion. But again, I'd like to find a $40 billion check in my couch cushions.
I guess so. Would first-time homeowners be the only group of people that would benefit from your program?
No, that was never part of the thought process. Thought process was the way to get Congress to look at this was to try and increase homeownership for single working parents, especially minority families, or anyone across the board that can actually make the payments and get into a home, do it in a fiscally sound manner. But as you know, I always thought as soon as they do the first step, second step will come later. The second step is for people right now that are struggling to stay into their home, and they're making their payments, they're slowly getting it back, they haven't walked away yet, they're being honorable in their mortgage commitment. If, under good fiscal parameters again, a one-time buy down of $45,000 on their existing mortgage would help lower the monthly mortgage payments enough to make it much more viable for them to be successful in their mortgage commitment, we can do this for existing homeowners. Stop the flood of foreclosures into the market. Right now, until the economy gets fixed, and the economy will not be fixed until you fix housing, we're going to have serious problems. Currently, there are estimates of anywhere from 3 to 10 million homes that are underwater. Many of them, 2 or 3 months and back on their monthly mortgage payments, but the people haven't fled yet. We have a shot at keeping a large percentage of them, or at least a moderate percentage, 40 or 50% or more, in their homes. Stop the flood of foreclosures. Get things back to normal here. Fix the economy.
Paul, this American Dream Home Loans proposal that you've been talking about to us today, how far along are you in the process of actually making this happen? Is it something that should be happening soon?
I would certainly hope so. We're in the middle of a presidential election cycle, so getting hold of anybody who's running on either side of the aisle is always rough, unless, of course, you cut them a check. But, I thought it was done a long time ago. I got one side of the aisle to write it up, and I figured the other side of the aisle would love it because it is fiscally conservative, it's well thought out, there aren't any holes in it. I thought they could come together for the good of jobs and families and minority home ownership and everything else you could throw at it. But it didn't quite work that way because I had mentioned Social Security. One side of the aisle said, hide this. He's going to open up discussions on something that we refuse to discuss under any terms whatsoever. So I crossed back over to the other side of the aisle, and one of the leading fiscal conservatives in the Senate said that he would co-sponsor. I still need an official sponsor. That will give me a number for the bill. That will help get it to the floor. I believe when it goes to the floor, the letters of support from business groups, the facts and figures are there. It should be virtually bulletproof and impossible to vote against. I mean, why would you want to kill real estate jobs, construction jobs, home ownership for minority families, or strengthening the economy, or hundreds of billions of dollars in federal and state revenues, all with no new taxes? I mean, what would be the excuse for not doing it?
Now, let's say someone decides they like this idea. Where could they learn more about it, and what could they actually do to help make it happen?
Phone calls are always good on making it happen. This happened through the mail and on the phone. Now, granted, thousands and thousands of phone calls went into doing this. But 1 or 2 phone calls from somebody who likes the idea and would like to see it go for hearings, call your congressperson, call your senator, tell friends that are worried about becoming homeowners or are having a problem with their existing home and fighting to keep it. Tell them to go to the website, get a lot of hits there. Make some phone calls to Congress, have them bring it to the floor and kick the tires. If it doesn't hold air, I'll drag the proposal out and dig a hole in front of Congress and say a prayer over it and go home and shut up. The numbers work. Nobody's found a hole in it. Anything they would like to do to help make it happen, phone calls work miracles. Call your congressman or your senator and say, how come you guys won't bring this to the floor? If you're in construction and you're hurting for a job, this will get you your job back.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you very much for your time today and all your many, many years of hard work on your personal crusade to make this happen. I think after today and people checking out the website, many other people will want to help you make it happen.
Well, I hope you're right. It'd be nice to see this done. It's been much, much longer fight than I anticipated. I knew I'd touched a can of worms you're not supposed to mention, Social Security. Phooey. It can be fixed. Anybody who wants further information, wants to see all the documents, just goes to the website, AmericanDreamHomeownersAct.org. And thanks.